Hi, everybody. Welcome. Please feel free to enter our virtual space, find a seat, get comfortable, perhaps take a method of note taking as we'll be getting started momentarily. All right. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Amber Nicholson. I'm the Assistant Director of the Health Professions Advising Center at UC Riverside. And I'm joined today by one of my colleagues, Dr. Jennifer Kavetsky, who is the coordinator of our Undergraduate Writing Center, also at the University of California, Riverside. We're going to be spending our afternoon together talking about how to tell your story through your application narratives and highlight your interest for pursuing a career in the health professions. As we get started, I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Jennifer Kavetsky.
Hi, everyone. We like to start with a disclaimer that writing is a subjective and personal process. There's no one right way to approach essay writing. If you have a clear vision for how you want your essay to sound, go for it. That's great. This session is designed to share practical ideas and suggestions for crafting an effective personal statement. A personal statement is designed to help admissions committees learn more about the applicant outside of grades and test scores. Generally, we recommend focusing on 3 questions for the essay. Where have you been? Where are you now? And where are you going? A personal statement may also include the student's motivation for pursuing medicine, how clinical or extracurricular involvement helped them confirm that interest, information about their personal characteristics, or it may demonstrate their understanding of the profession. But the 3-part model of how their initial interest started, how they explored and confirmed their interest in a healthcare career, and their future goals will remain the backbone of the essay. Here are some general guidelines for the current application cycle. Usually students will be responding to some version of why have you selected the field of X. For medical schools, the length is 5,300 characters, including spaces, which works out to about 1 to 1.5 pages single spaced. To save characters, we recommend only 1 space after each period. Additionally, they'll often be copying an essay they've written in their word processor into a text box in the application, so they should recheck their formatting after pasting. Students should choose a clear, readable font. We recommend 12-point Times New Roman or 11-point Calibri.
If you've ever been part of a construction project or large event, you've likely learned that your project planning and preparation are equal to, if not more important than, your execution. Writing is no different. Unfortunately, there's not going to be a situation where you sit down at your laptop with a blank Word document and complete a personal statement draft by the time your coffee is gone. That just isn't real life. Instead, consider starting your writing process by journaling your thoughts on the questions to the left. The first 4 questions are linked to our 3-part essay framework of how you initially became interested in medicine, how you've clinically explored and confirmed your interest, and what you think your future goals and objectives are. Question 5 will assist you in determining if submitting a disadvantage statement is appropriate or not. And if so, what relevant personal information would be included in this disadvantage statement? Lastly, question 6 will assist students who are applying to academic record enhancing post-bac programs prior to starting professional school. These students should identify what issues, challenges, or barriers have impacted their academic studies, what specific changes they made to navigate their situation, and what evidence they can provide that demonstrates their academic readiness for medical school. One final point about preparation is when considering extracurricular activities, yes, the main focus of your personal statement will likely be on activities that are clinical in nature. However, there is an additional work and activities section of the application where students will include the same extracurricular experiences from their personal statement, but will also go on to share volunteer experiences, research, paid employment of any kind, leadership, personal development organizations, religious experiences, cultural organizations, or even Greek affiliations. Hopefully, you've been keeping a comprehensive resume or list of your outside involvements during college, because you will need that for your work and activities section as part of your primary application.
It can be helpful to think of the personal statement as a story that begins with the introduction, moves through the middle of the essay, and ends with the conclusion. We recommend that personal statements be organized in chronological order because that's usually the easiest for both the writer and the reader. That said, if you feel that a story is best told out of order, go for it. I tend to see this approach most often with older students who may have worked in other fields before deciding to pursue medicine. They have more ground to cover, so it doesn't always make sense to begin at the beginning. Generally, personal statements begin with a brief story or overview of what initially sparked your interest in healthcare. The body of the essay gives examples of how you explored and confirmed your interest in medicine. Finally, the essay ends with a brief discussion of your future goals. Common questions include, but aren't I supposed to tell a story? Yes, you're telling the story about how you've determined that medicine is the right career for you. Remember, you're not applying for a degree in fiction writing. You don't need to worry about the dialogue or character motivation or crafting a sophisticated narrative structure. Another common question is, how do I stand out? You stand out by thoughtfully and clearly articulating your why. There's no scenario in which the admission committee is going to read the first sentence or the first paragraph or even the entire essay, put the application down and say, get this person on the phone and admit them right now. The goal of the personal statement is to demonstrate that you're a thoughtful, mature candidate who they would like to interview. For the introduction, ask yourself, what was the spark that lit your match? It doesn't have to be a moment when the heavens opened up and the angels sang. But looking back, you can usually identify an experience that started you on this path, even if you didn't realize it at the time. Generally, you want to avoid the really cliched, boring opening lines, like, ever since I was 5, I always wanted to be a doctor. You haven't always wanted to be anything. When you were a baby, you didn't know you had feet. You certainly didn't know what career you wanted to pursue. Another one to avoid is, allow me to introduce myself. My name is, they know, it's on your application. Another common opening line to avoid is, the question asked me to discuss. Again, they know, they wrote it. That said, it can be a helpful pre-writing technique to rephrase the question in your own words. Just make sure to take that part out before you submit your essay. On the right side of the slide, we have a sample introduction. Amber and I deliberately chose examples that were kind of average. You can go on the internet and find examples of the 10 best Harvard Medical School application essays, but really, nobody writes like that. Those people didn't even write like that. Those essays have gone through at least one more round of editing between when they were submitted and when they were published. Also, more than 10 people got into Harvard Medical School. We wish that instead there was a book of essays that got the job done. So this is an example of a successful student essay, student intro, and it got the job done. So growing up in place, oral health care was considered a luxury rather than a necessity. Most people expected teeth to degrade as they aged. Once I moved to the US, I realized that visiting the dentist was critical to maintaining proper overall health. Unfortunately, as immigrants, my family could not afford dental care until my father was able to maintain a stable job where dental insurance was a reasonable expense. When I was finally able to see my first dentist and later get braces and have emergency oral surgery, my interest in the field of dentistry began. Is this the best introduction we've ever read? No, but it's clear, easy to read, clearly communicates the person's interest, and makes me want to read the rest of the essay.
Before you begin crafting your body paragraphs, it's helpful to identify the theme of your essay. I know the term theme can often make science majors uncomfortable, so an alternative way to think about a theme is quote unquote identifying your why. We understand that sometimes the why behind our decisions are not tangible reasons, and instead they're more of a feeling. A student might say, I don't know, I just love it. And although it is great and important to enjoy what we do, that reasoning won't assist an admissions committee in understanding your interest in and aptitude for a particular career. Additionally, as you're probably scanning our hexagon of themes, you might be feeling as if you identify with most or all of these reasons to pursue a career in the health field. That is also great, and you're definitely making writing progress. However, these essays do have very limited character counts, and it would not be realistic to discuss all of these themes in a 1 to 1.5 single spaced page essay. For students who have identified an interest in serving underserved communities as their primary motivator for pursuing medicine, they might be discussing the importance of health education, prevention, language barriers, or likely lifestyle management as ways that they plan to support these same communities. This would, in essence, comprise their theme. Other students are not really interested in lifestyle health management and instead are more interested in genetic abnormalities and/or specialty care. Although it is not common to see a student identify a medical specialty in their personal statement, this can become your theme if you have appropriate clinical, service, or research experience that support your exploration and confirmation of that particular specialty interest. Other students become very passionate about research and teaching throughout their undergraduate education. They've developed extensive experiences serving as supplemental instructors, tutors, mentors, and even researchers as they pursue their future career goal, with perhaps a plan to focus on academic medicine or be a researching physician. Lastly, other students are not interested in careers in medicine and instead might be interested in pre-physical therapy, who those students oftentimes have a passion in pain reduction, increased mobility, and the ability to assist a patient in living an independent life. Whereas pre-dental and pre-optometry students are often drawn to the ability to work with their hands and develop long-term or ongoing relationships with patients. And lastly, the accessibility of a pharmacist to their patients and communities is often a large interest and passion for our pre-pharmacy students. As you can imagine, this is not an exhaustive list of themes or examples, but hopefully does provide you with some tangible ways to identify your why. Now that we have identified your theme, hopefully that will assist you in identifying appropriate extracurricular examples to highlight in your body paragraph. We find a helpful way to think about these body paragraphs as a way to articulate how you've explored and confirmed your career interest. What have you done professionally to know that medicine is the right career for you? Generally, highlighting clinical experiences such as hospital volunteering, free or low-cost clinics, volunteering at a nursing home or hospice, shadowing, scribing, or even a medical mission can help you explain how you know that medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, etc., is the right career for you, as it is through clinical experiences where you've had the opportunity to interact with both patients and providers within your community. There might also be an opportunity to discuss mentorship, teaching, or research, particularly if those experiences are central to your theme. For example, you might discuss serving as a supplemental instructor if you chose your theme of health education, but generally clinical experiences is what allows a student to explain why medicine or their chosen health profession is the right career for them.
When writing your essay, you want to avoid vague generalities like, I want to become a doctor because I want to help people. That's good. If you want to be a doctor, you should definitely want to help people. The problem is there's lots of jobs that help people. That isn't really getting at why being a doctor is the best way for you to help people, or why it's important to you to help people. It's also a good idea to think about, how do you want to help people? Amber and I work with students. We help them. We have chosen not to go into medicine and help people in a different way. So thinking about why this is the right way for you to help people is what you want to think about for your essay. We also recommend using generally specific examples. I know that's not the most helpful term, so let me just define it. You have to get through a lot of content in your personal statement, and you don't have a lot of room. If you try to be too specific, like I remember the day in April when Mr. Smith came to the clinic, it's going to take a lot of characters to tell that story. But on the other hand, you don't want to do something like, I volunteered at a hospital and I saw stuff. That's too general. Instead, you want to kind of aim for the middle. So you want to talk about things that are specific to you and your experiences, but on a more general level. So instead of talking about Mr. Smith and his diabetes, you could talk about how you saw lots of patients struggling to access healthcare, or how much it meant to many patients when you, the volunteer, sat and talked to them. So it's still specific to you, but on a slightly more general level. At this point in your essay, you have either convinced the readers or you haven't. The goal of the conclusion is to wrap things up. Conclusions for medical school also tend to be pretty short. Because you don't know what your residency will be, you don't want to focus too narrowly on a specialty. You also don't want to go the other way and promise to cure all patients or fix the US healthcare system, because honestly, that's not going to happen. Not even Bernie Sanders could fix US healthcare by himself. He needed Congress at the very least. Instead, we recommend talking about what kind of physician you want to be. Your conclusion could highlight a particular interest of yours, like research or being a health educator. Or you could focus on particular qualities like cultural competency or patient advocacy. You can even do both. Someone who's interested in research might also mention that they have the analytical skills for the role, or someone who wants to address health disparities might highlight their cultural competency. We have another conclusion here to kind of give you an idea. So as an aspiring physician passionate about serving those from underserved backgrounds, I believe that healthcare goes beyond providing the proper diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. It is important for physicians to provide necessary preventative education, be an advocate for their patients' health, and treat patients with empathy, which are qualities that I'm confident I will embody as a primary care physician. This conclusion wraps the essay up by giving us an idea about what kind of physician this person wants to be. It's also only 2 sentences long. They really can be that short because you are just trying to close your essay confidently.
As I alluded to at the beginning of our presentation, there's an additional writing section of the application that's generally called the work and activity section. In most centralized applications, students can enter about 15 different extracurricular activities in this work and activity section. And each entry will have about 700 characters, including spaces, to provide a description of that activity. That's about a paragraph in length. AMCAS, the MD application, takes this section a little bit further, and it allows students to select 3 experiences that are their quote unquote most meaningful activities. And when a student selects those most meaningful activities, they're given an additional 1,325 characters, including spaces, for that description, which is about 3 paragraphs in total per most meaningful extracurricular activity. Although we're discussing this section in the latter half of our presentation, Jennifer and I would actually encourage you all to consider writing your work and activities essays first. It's a much more approachable section of the application and is a great way for science majors to practice and polish those writing skills before jumping into the more difficult sections of their personal statement or disadvantaged essay. We do like you to only include activities that occurred during college in this work and activity section, whereas in your personal statement, extracurricular activities from any point of your life, including K through 12, could be appropriate to include. We definitely think that everything counts. We know that students are highly involved outside the classroom in very logical experiences like clinical and research, but students are also involved with religious organizations, cultural clubs, hobby or social clubs, Greek organizations, paid jobs, conferences, and even general professional development experiences. And we would like all of that extracurricular involvement to be highlighted or showcased in this work and activity section. As students are crafting these individual extracurricular essays, we would encourage you to include 3 pieces of information. The first being some context about what the organization or program is, particularly if that organization or program is unique to your institution. It would be helpful to give a sense of the mission statement or vision of that program to an admissions committee. Additionally, we would like for you to highlight what you did as part of your involvement in that organization. What were your roles? What were your responsibilities? And that can range from simple or basic membership all the way through leadership positions. Lastly, it will also be helpful to give a sense of what you learned, gained, or developed through your participation in this organization to the admissions committee as well. So that 3-part model of what is the program, what did you do as part of your participation, and what did you learn, gain, or develop over your time with that organization, again, is the helpful information that we would encourage you to include in these work and activities essays.
In the activity description, what you learned, gained, and developed does not necessarily have to be medically related. Some of your activities obviously will connect to medicine. Maybe you volunteered in a hospital and you've learned something about the healthcare profession by doing so. That's great. But don't feel like you have to force all of your activities to have a medical connection. Maybe what you learned from a particular activity was public speaking skills. Maybe you got to explore an interest of yours. Maybe you got to do community outreach. All of those are valuable things to learn, gain, or develop from your activity.
Lastly, the third narrative section of many centralized applications is a disadvantage statement. The purpose of this type of essay is to share context about your lived experience, things that you have gone through in your life that wouldn't otherwise be included in your personal statement, extracurricular essays, or even secondary applications. Some of this essay may intersect with your introductory paragraph, particularly if you take the focus of your introductory paragraph of an anecdote style where you're recapping your background. There may actually be quite a bit of overlap between that type of introductory paragraph and a disadvantage statement. But the difference philosophically in these essays is that your personal statement is intended to articulate your why. Why have you selected medicine, dentistry, or pharmacy as your health career of interest? Whereas a disadvantage statement, or maybe calling it a special life circumstances essay, the purpose of that essay is to, again, shed more context to your lived experience that wouldn't otherwise be evident in your application. Some of the information that presents itself in a disadvantage statement may likely have occurred in your K through 12 years. It is appropriate to include information during college as well, but for many of our students, we find that they feel they've had more extreme hardships and challenges in their younger years than in their college years. If you go on the internet and look up examples of disadvantage statements, you definitely will see a focus on extreme hardships and traumas. Certainly things like homelessness, abuse, assault, neglect, or hoarding would be absolutely appropriate lived experience context to add to this type of essay. And I think anybody who's experienced those traumatic situations probably has a good idea that they should be writing this type of optional essay. However, Jen and I, again, work at the University of California, Riverside, and we primarily serve first generation college students, first generation or immigrant Americans, and students whose language is something other than English, in addition to students that may come from underrepresented minority backgrounds or be eligible for Pell Grants, Cal Grants, and other financial assistance. Those quote unquote common challenges might be very regular for students and humans to interact with or encounter, but they're not necessarily ideal aspects of our lived experience that made it easy for us to navigate college, higher education, or even applying to graduate and professional schools. So students that are first generation American or first generation college students who grew up in a household where English was not their primary language or their first language, students who have parents that work in what we would call a blue collar job, they may be underinsured or uninsured. The student may have engaged in paid work to help supplement their educational expenses or cost of living. Maybe they were a transfer student, they commuted, they're a parent themselves, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Jen and I can provide a litany of examples of students' kind of common yet not ideal lived experiences that would be appropriate to disclose in this disadvantage statement. We do have a sample to the right that you're welcome to read at your leisure. And this is an example that hopefully allows you to see that sticking to facts in this type of essay and not having a necessity to justify your lived experience is a very helpful strategy for a student to feel comfortable addressing their hardships and challenges in this type of essay with the admissions committees. A student who's applying to a professional program ideally is academically competitive to be doing so. And so therefore their disadvantage statement is going to be context to an already academically competitive application, and showing them the facts of your life will help strengthen that application to say, you know, a student who is already academically successful in spite of having to navigate some significant life challenges might be even more of interest to an admissions committee than a student who's also academically successful, but maybe hasn't had to encounter the resiliency and the adaptability of a student who is filing a disadvantage statement. So we're really looking for you to share the facts of your lived experience to provide context to your application. We're not looking for you to necessarily justify your experiences of why that they may have been negative, but ultimately a positive towards your application competitiveness.
Students often struggle with this essay in part because of the name. They may feel that their immigrant parents are not a disadvantage and in fact are an inspiration, and are reluctant to talk about being the child of immigrants in an essay labeled disadvantage. We prefer the term special life circumstances because we feel that much better reflects the purpose of this essay, to give context about additional challenges or context to an applicant's lived experience. This is a chance to show the reader of the application about the context of your life and the distance you've traveled to arrive at applying to medical school. Talking about growing up in a home where English wasn't your first language, or the challenges of figuring out how to apply to college as a first-gen student, are all experiences that will make you a better healthcare provider. So they are valuable and worth speaking about. Using this essay as an opportunity to do that both provides context and helps show that you are a strong applicant. Remember, writing is a subjective and personal process. There are many ways to approach essay writing. If you have a clear vision of your personal statement, that's great, run with it. Remember that the goal of the personal statement is to articulate why you were interested in a particular profession and go beyond simply saying, I like science and I want to help people.
At this point in the presentation, we recognize that you still may need some additional resources to facilitate the rest of your writing process. I would like to offer the 4 additional resources to hopefully carry you moving forward. The National Association of Advisors for the Health Professions has a publication entitled Write for Success, Preparing a Successful Professional School Application, which you can purchase from their website. Additionally, there are some free resources that we would like to draw your attention to. First being the Purdue OWL Writing Lab, which has a very robust website of free or low-cost resources for college students preparing for lots of different writing essays. Additionally, the AAMC, which is the Association of American Medical Colleges, does have 2 free publications for students and advisors in crafting their personal statements, which are both free and open source resources found on their respective websites. Our last and final parting piece of advice for you all is to start your writing process early. Take a positive mindset when writing your essays, enjoy the process, and happy writing.
That concludes the formal part of our presentation. We have our information up on this slide. Amber, who is a pre-health advisor at UC Riverside, with her email address and the website for the Health Professions Advising Center. Myself, Jennifer Kavetsky, at the Undergraduate Writing Center at UC Riverside. We have my email address and the link to my writing homepage. We are now opening the floor up to questions.